Shalom, my friends. Salam. Greetings from Vermont here. I want to hold space and honor the immense pain, sadness, and loss that we are experiencing on the ground in the Middle East, individually, and throughout our global human community. Words cannot begin to describe the depth of despair that we are going through. I'd like to use this humble space to extend my love and compassion to all and to offer some words of reflection and sounds from my soul. I'm very aware of how divisive and layered this war and conflict is, and I invite you to take a deep breath with me, reconnect to our bodies and our soul as we navigate through this time together. I invite you, if you want, to shake your body out, to acknowledge the pain and the fear, and open your heart to allow the love and compassion that is inside within each of us and our collective us to shine through. War is emotional, divisive, and traumatic, a lethal game where no one wins. It breaks my heart. I mourn all of the lives lost in this war and historically. I condemn Hamas for the horrific attacks that took 1,200 Israeli lives and hostages on October 7th. And I condemn Israel and the brutal siege on Gaza that has claimed over 11,000 Palestinian lives, the majority of which are children and women. I condemn the U.S. government for the unequivocal support of the Israeli military and agenda. What is happening in Gaza right now is a nightmare. The northern half has been decimated, hospitals being bombed, 1.5 million displaced, many of which who are already refugees living in Gaza. There's no water, food, electricity, or basic medical supplies. This must stop. Most pressing, I believe we must do everything in our power to demand an enduring ceasefire, de-escalation of violence, massive humanitarian aid in Gaza, and the return of the hostages. The majority of Democrats in the U.S. support an immediate ceasefire. It is time for our leadership to sign the House resolution right now. The powerful systems of war and control is successfully continuing to divide us. This is a war of consciousness. The dominant narratives are controlling mass consciousness and how we are showing up in this war. The global cyber war continues to desensitize us to the reality and meaning of war and push us further apart. But in this great divide of sides and horrific extremism comes a space for us to inhabit together in union, in our shared vision for humanity, dignity, freedom, and safety for all. We have the power to change, and it is going to take us all coming together. I am grateful for the time I lived in the region and the many years I worked with young Israeli and Palestinian youth musicians in the NGO Heartbeat from 2011 to 2016. It was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. During this time, I witnessed young, courageous Palestinian and Israeli musicians coming together to transform the status quo and challenge the status quo of violence, fear, separation, and injustice through the co-creation and facilitated dialogue that we were a part of. We took our music and messages to communities around the Middle East, the US, and Europe. The tours included performances and briefings at the US Congress, where we advocated for Congress to launch the International Fund for Israeli-Palestinian Peace. The fund would have provided $200 million annually to support person-to-person diplomacy efforts like Heartbeat in the region. That was 2014, almost 10 years ago. When I step back and look at my own story before my experiences living in the Middle East and working with Palestinians and Israelis, I can easily see that I was strongly influenced by the dominant narratives and propaganda. I was an uninformed middle-class Jewish kid taught to fear Palestinians and that Israel was the designated homeland and haven for Jews, our birthright. But now I am a man, and I have lived in the region and seen with my own eyes. I know hundreds of Palestinians and Israelis who are beautiful people, who are hungry for their dignity, equality, and safety. They have to live behind these poisonous narratives and storylines that lead to the continued oppression and perpetration of fear and hatred. Nelson Mandela spoke the truth when he said, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than the opposite." Amen, man. My first trip to Israel was with my family when I was 14. We visited Givat Chaim Yehud, the kibbutz where my dad lived and worked in the 70s, hiked Masada, went to the Dead Sea, and walked around the old city of Jerusalem. We also had lunch with Moshe Aarons, the former Israeli defense minister who happened to be the father-in-law of my dad's best friend from medical school. I was 14 and wanted to be hanging with my friends back home, making music, meeting girls, teenage stuff. I really didn't want to be there, to be honest. But I distinctly remember the edge and intensity I felt from being in that place, and notably from the Israelis I was interacting with. But beyond that, I didn't really know what to make of the whole land and landscape of what was going on. When I was 21, I went back on an all-expenses paid trip via Birthright in 2006. This experience that is designed to make young Jews fall in love with Israel and in turn support the Zionist mission. It had the opposite effect on me. The propaganda was palpable and one-sided, barely scratching the surface of the intense impact the state of Israel was having on Palestinians, the forced displacement, the Nakba, the daily struggles, the loss, the occupation, etc. My birthright trip was an awakening for me, and I knew I had to return to meet Palestinians firsthand, to learn about their experiences. I felt an obligation as a Jew to know more and to offer what I could to help build peace. Music has always been a powerful expression for me. I had a spark of a vision to try to use music to learn about the conflict, and 2, hopefully, build bridges and transformation in whatever scale I could. I was green, but full of hope and ambition. 4 years later, I met Ami Yares at his performance at Temple Emmanuel in Providence. He was an expat living in Jaffa and worked as one of the Jewish facilitators with Heartbeat that was just getting started. I shared my dreams and interest to work and visit with Arab and Jewish youth musicians to try to build peace. He told me about Heartbeat and gave me a loose invitation to volunteer at one of their meetings. That was enough for me. I bought a one-way ticket to Ben Gurion, and it was January of 2011, right as the Arab Spring was kicking off in Egypt. I can't even begin to describe how profound and transformative this experience was for me. Arriving in Jerusalem with no place to live or really an agenda beyond learning and making connections with musicians and people behind these storylines and narratives that I had been brought up with. Little did I know that I would have this extremely powerful experience that launched into 5 years with working with Heartbeat, where I established our international tour platform. I produced 5 tours, including performances and briefings at the U.S. Congress and State Department, as I mentioned, in addition to 25 leading universities and festivals. The tours helped us activate tens of thousands of new allies and cultivate networks to sustainably our Heartbeat organization. I am deeply grateful for the opportunity to work with these young musicians, to learn from them and support them to share their stories with their own communities, but also with the world at large. Why Israel and Palestine? Why is this place so significant to our global community? Well, it's part of the cradle of civilization, the epicenter of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, the mythical land from the Bible, Torah, Quran. These are the most read books in the whole world. This war, this conflict affects us all. And we all have the power to build peace and justice, or to continue to perpetuate war, division, and death. As American citizens, we directly support the Israeli military occupation that continues this asymmetrical, horrific crisis where no one wins. $3.8 billion of our tax money from the U.S. go to the IDF every single year, and the recent additional $14 billion package to support the IDF that Biden and the House recently passed. My friends, we get what we pay for. We're seeing shekels being invested into person-to-person diplomacy, into peace and justice initiatives for Palestinians and Israelis, while billions of dollars every year are being poured into the IDF, into the military, into the occupation. I believe the occupation is one of the root causes of the violence, hatred, and inequality and terror that we are witnessing now and have been for decades. I am morally and spiritually opposed to it, and I believe it will only perpetuate this nightmare. Again, I condemn Hamas's attacks and violence in any form. It is awful and heartbreaking. I believe Israel is also partly responsible for the creation of Hamas, and Gazans are literally living in an open-air prison. It is insane. I believe the end of the occupation is the only sustainable solution for building a lasting just peace for all. And I'm 100% include the safety and well-being for Israelis with that too in a broader picture. I also believe on a global level we need to invest significantly in these person-to-person diplomacy programs like Heartbeat, Yad V'Yad, school integration, social and economic collaboration to build critical consciousness and opportunity, and we will see much less violence and evil 360 degrees. This was the model for ending the violence and religious colonial war in Northern Ireland. There was a $120 million annual fund established to foster this transformation and similar programs. I'm not naive in thinking that the end of the occupation will establish peace overnight. I don't claim to have all the answers, and I know how complex this conflict is. Creating change is a process. It has to happen from the ground up. Both Israelis and Palestinians investing in a shared future. Simultaneously, we need to have our global leaders fostering diplomatic, systematic change that is representative of the majority of civilians in the region. It is a long road, but one I believe is possible and hopefully we will see in our lifetime. I'd like to share a little bit about my experience joining other civil resistance movements and social justice movements. In 2016, I joined the peaceful resistance at Standing Rock in North Dakota, learning from the indigenous leaders in their methods of resisting genocide for over 500 years in this country, and also tribal nations for much longer around the world. At the essence of the resistance was prayer. There was no separation between the resistance and prayer. And this came to life in many ways, which I can explain. But also the philosophy of holding a space of love for each other and the oppressors we were facing. The multinational Energy Transfer Partners Corp, backed by the U.S. Corp of Army of Engineers. Like the National Guard was literally standing on the top of these ancient sacred indigenous Lakota burial grounds, armed with automatic weapons, defending this pipeline being built, while we were on the other side of this river, responding in prayer, in song, in chants, in drumming, in our collective action, to show that what was at stake here, both the water and the sovereignty of the indigenous people. The Standing Rock movement really echoes a lot of the intent and the strategy, I believe, that went into our civil rights movement. And I think about the legendary John Lewis and his sharings on training for the freedom marches, and to hold oneself the hope and inner reality of the beloved community that we are all a part of. It takes a ton of courage and love and compassion to enter into resistance and change in this kind of head and emotional space. And I believe it's one that's deeply needed in the movement for peace and justice in Israel and Palestine. I'm keeping close tabs on the various different resistance movements, tactics, and strategies being used right now. I see the rage. I see the pain. I'm observing the hate, the fear, and defensive rhetoric, and the cyber war that is unfolding. I'm aware of how layered this war is and has been historically. The reality is that Israelis and Palestinians are not going anywhere. They're going to remain in the region. And I do believe that we need to imagine a shared future of peace, justice, safety, and dignity for all. One of the simplest laws of, I think, our human experience is no justice, no peace. So if we unpack that a little bit, if we want peace, then we must establish justice for all. Other laws of nature prevail, such as you cannot put out fire with fire. We need an immediate ceasefire to save human lives and to restart this process of transforming the region. As we move forward in our journey, I ask us all to check in with ourselves. Are our beliefs and actions about this war and conflict rooted in fear and anger, or are they rooted in love and compassion? What are our structures of knowing? What informs our beliefs and actions? How many Palestinians do you really know? How many Israelis? As a practicing Jewish man, I especially ask my Jewish brothers and sisters to examine the narratives you've been brought up with. How does Israel and the occupation align with your Jewish values? How does it not? In an ideal world, what is your vision for the well-being for all, the peace and justice and dignity for all who inhabit the region? Ask ourselves, am I acting in love or am I acting in fear? What kind of relationships do I want to have outside of my tribe? I want to reiterate that I care deeply about all human lives. I don't believe in revenge or the competition or victimization of suffering. I believe in the many, many good Israelis and Palestinians that I personally know. I believe in the agency of our global community. I believe in a more peaceful and just society in Israel and Palestine and the world at large. I believe in our power to change. I believe there is another way. And as we enter in this time of Thanksgiving, may we learn to lean into love over fear and help realize the world we want to live in together. Shalom, salam, peace. I'd like to share a song from the new Billy Wilder album. And the album is called Trying to Get Free. I think this is an ever unfolding process. I feel super privileged with the life I lead and all the gifts I've been given. I feel grateful to be connected with you all. And may we walk this road together, my friends. This song is called We Are the Ones. Every line repeats itself at the end of the verses. And I invite you to sing with me. Child's dancing in the morning light. It's all in a groove and freedom alive, freedom alive, freedom alive. The world through her eyes, anew every day. May her spirit guide us to another can see below. We're living in the madness, don't know where to go. Don't know where to go, don't know where to go. We are the ones we're waiting for. Paradise on fire, our home is burned on down. Smoke signals tell us time to turn around. Time to turn around, time to turn around. Many friends we've lost, good men have died. A year filled with sorrow, tears we have cried, tears we have cried, tears we have cried. We are the ones we're waiting for. Our story ain't over, this page has just begun. Out of the darkness, step into the sun. Step into the sun, step into the sun. Child is dancing in the morning light. It's all in her grooving. Freedom alive, freedom alive, freedom alive. We are the ones we're waiting for. We are the ones we're waiting for. Peace, my friends.